This screencast is the Lady of Shalott lecture. We're going to start with a look at the Pre-Raphaelite movement, and that is an artistic movement, since it is heavily involved with the illustration of the Lady of Shalott, and as we shall see with Christina Rossetti's Goblin Market. This is J.W. Waterhouse's version of the lady in her boat. The Pre-Raphaelites were a group of English painters, poets, and critics founded in 1848 by William Holman Hunt, John Everett Millais, and Dante Gabriel Rossetti. These three were joined by others to form a seven-member, what they called Brotherhood of Artists. The Pre-Raphaelites have been considered the first avant-garde, meaning experimental or innovative movement in art. They wanted to return to the detail, the rich color, and the complex composition of Italian and Flemish art before the artist Raphael's influence, and so hence their name, the Pre-Raphaelites. And you can see how much incredible detail, the depth of color that's in this particular painting. Rossetti met Hunt after seeing his painting called The Eve of St. Agnes, and that's this painting here, based on Keats's poem. As a poet himself, Rossetti wanted to develop links between romantic poetry and art. The movement was particularly interested in medieval culture. They thought it had a spiritual and creative integrity that was lost in later years. Rossetti was the head of this movement within the Brotherhood, and this is his version of Joan of Arc. The Pre-Raphaelites encountered controversy because of Millais's painting called Christ in the House of His Parents. Many considered it blasphemous, most notably Charles Dickens, who said that Millais had made the Holy Family look like alcoholics and slum dwellers, while others disliked what they called contorted and absurd medieval poses. Dickens also thought that Mary was ugly in this painting. Mary Dickens, Charles's daughter, disagreed with her father and actually was herself a big fan of the Pre-Raphaelites. Millais got back at Dickens by using Mary as the model for his painting, The Black Brunswicker. Dickens, of course, was appalled. So this is Mary here. Another model that they used, they used anybody that was around them, but this particular model that Dante Gabriel Rossetti used for the Annunciation is actually his sister Christina Rossetti, and she's the one who wrote The Goblin Market that we'll be reading next. So, enough about the artist then. Let's move on to the poet. Alfred Lord Tennyson lived from 1809 to 1892. He was a very popular poet during his lifetime. In fact, his poems could be found on the bookshelves of practically every family in the U.S. and England at one time. He came from an unusual family. His father was an alcoholic minister. One of his brothers was committed to an insane asylum, and another was hopelessly addicted to opium. Tennyson himself was the fourth of 12 children. He attended Cambridge University, but had to drop out because of family financial problems, so he went home and he wrote poetry. As I said, his poetry was very popular, and after Wordsworth's death, Tennyson was named Poet Laureate of England. He eventually earned more than £10,000 a year for his writing, an almost unbelievable sum of money at that time. By the way, the photographer who took this photo called him, quote, the most beautiful old man on earth, end quote. And really, Tennyson was considered something of a character by most people. He looks like a character, don't you think? Probably the most important thing to remember about his poetry is that it often links scenery, whether landscape or weather, like the weather, Weather, with a character's state of mind. Tennyson's poem, The Lady of Shalott, was first published in 1832. It is one of the most illustrated poems ever, probably coming in second only to Paradise Lost. The poem employs a pretty unusual rhyme scheme. Each stanza has 9 lines, and the rhyme scheme is A, B, C, 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 B. So we have lie, rise, sky, and buy. And then Camelot rhymes with Shalott. And then we have go, blow, and below. As for the meter, it is written in what's called iambic tetrameter. Tetrameter means four, and there are 4 feet to each line. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4. Um, and so there are a total of syllables on each line of poetry. The first stanza takes us into the scene. On either side the river lie long fields of barley and of rye that clothe the wold and meet the sky, and through the field the road runs by to many-towered Camelot. And up and down the people go, gazing where the lilies blow, round an island there below, the island of Shalott. I always imagine this particular stanza like the beginning of a movie where we kind of start out way above the scene and we're flying over the landscape and we're getting closer and closer and closer to the ground. We see the river surrounded by fields. There's a road that runs along the river, and then we zoom into the island of Shalott where the lady's castle is. Tennyson is bringing us right into the action here. At the beginning of part 2, we learn a couple of important things about the lady who lives in the tower on the island in the middle of the river. There she weaves by night and day a magic web with colors gay. She has heard a whisper say, a curse is on her if she stay to look down to Camelot. She knows not what the curse may be, and so she weaveth steadily, and little other care hath she, the lady of Shalott. So for some reason she has a curse on her, or at least she thinks she has a curse on her, that will take effect if she stops weaving and looks out of her window at Camelot. She can watch the world, but only through a mirror. And moving through a mirror clear that hangs before her all the year, shadows of the world appear. There she sees the highway near, winding down to Camelot. There the river eddy whirls, and there the curly village churls, and the red cloaks of market girls pass onward from Shalott. Although she can't look at it directly, she can look at the world through her mirror. In a lot of ways, this is like Plato's allegory of the cave, in which people can't look at the world directly, but can only look at the shadows of the world that are cast upon the back wall of the cave. So people would walk along this roadway, and there would be a fire behind them, and these people, these prisoners, are facing the back wall of the cave, and they can only see the world by the shadows that are cast upon this wall. So here's the lady with her loom and her mirror. Here's her loom, here's the mirror. And you can see that she is weaving what she sees, but what she sees is only the reflection of the world, not the world itself. This is another image of her looking at her shadows of the world. In part 3, she sees the reflection of Lancelot riding down the road toward Camelot, and in some sort of reverse version of courtly love, she's drawn to him just by his looks. His attraction is her undoing. In lines 108 through 117, everything changes. She left the web, she left the loom, she made 3 paces through the room. So she looks away from the mirror, this is the mirror over here, and stands looking directly out of the window. She saw the water lily bloom. She saw the helmet and the plume. She looked down to Camelot. Whenever you have flowers opening in poetry, you always have to think of a sexual awakening. Combine that with the phallic plume on Lancelot's helmet, and Tennyson's meaning here is clear. Because she is now face to face with the world, the lady is no longer innocent. This is when the curse goes into effect. Out flew the web and floated wide. The mirror cracked from side to side. The curse has come upon me, cried the lady of Shalott. The mirror is ruined. You can see the crack back here in the background. And her weaving has come unraveled, kind of trapping her. You can see it coming unraveled here. Here's another illustration of that moment. I appreciate the movement in this image. You can almost see a tornado effect whirling around her. Her hair is wild, and all of her threads of her weaving have just come undone. In part four, the lady leaves her tower and boards a boat to float down the river to Camelot. Notice how the weather has changed here. This is Tennyson linking the weather to the character's state of mind. Once again, this is Waterhouse's version. The lady lies down in the boat as it drifts along. For a while she sings, but then, just as she comes within sight of the first house of Camelot, she dies. Artists have always found this a very inspirational image. You can find hundreds of versions of this image on the internet. Here's another one. I find this photographic image particularly creepy. So as she nears Camelot, the townspeople see her floating along. Finally, in the last stanza, her boat comes into town. Who is this, and what is here? And in the lighted palace near died the sound of royal cheer. No one knows who she is or why she's here, but they all know something big is happening. And they cross themselves for fear, all the knights at Camelot. This image is of them bringing her up out of the water. I don't know what happened to her boat in this image. The poem ends with Lancelot leaning over her. This illustration is by Dante Gabriel Rossetti, by the way. But Lancelot mused a little space. He said, "She has a lovely face. God in his mercy lend her grace, the Lady of Shalott." Here she gave up her whole life for him, and he has no idea. It is such an incredibly tragic ending. So I'm going to leave you with a couple of questions. First, what do you think caused the lady to be cursed? Can you come up with a prehistory to explain her situation? It could be just something creative on your part, just like, why is she cursed that she can't watch the world? And two, why do you think that this poem has inspired so many artists? What is it about it that speaks to them? Is it a poem about creativity, writing, and or art? If so, what is it saying about that creativity? So, lots to think about here, as always. Thank you.